Hello, this is the video on tissues and cells. We're looking at human systems. We're looking at a few tissue types. So the first cell, a zygote, starts out unspecialized, as we've already talked about. By the time you're an adult, there are between 75 trillion and 100 trillion cells. Most of these cells are specialized to carry out certain tasks. Cells are influenced to become differentiated by three factors: the contents of the cell's cytoplasm, the environment conditions, such as temperature, and the influence of neighboring cells. So you can actually see here some pictures of Siamese cats. Siamese cats are influenced by temperature, which is why they are white predominantly, but on the areas of their body that are cooler, the cells are influenced to stay black or to turn black. As the cell matures, more of its genes get turned on or off by the effects of other cells or environmental conditions. One combination of active and inactive genes will produce a skeletal muscle cell. A different combination will produce a nerve cell. If all the genes are turned off, the mature cell will no longer divide. So we're going to look at some certain tissue types. So these are differentiated cells forming a grouping of cells called tissue. So the first type of tissue we're going to look at is epithelial tissue. These line the surface of the body, and there's strong connections between the cells. They create the barriers that stop things from getting into the body. So the first type we're going to look at is skin epithelia. These are thin, flat cells that form a sheet, barriers between the inside and outside. And then the second type we're going to look at is columnar epithelia. So as opposed to being a thin, flat sheet, they're going to be column-shaped, vertical, and have lines inside, such as the inside of the small intestines, the esophagus, the trachea, and they may secrete mucus or absorb materials. They may also be covered in cilia. So here's a picture of the skin epithelia. You can see that this is a top view image, so it's showing it sort of looking down on the skin cells, so you can see that they're wide and flat. If we were to look at a cross section, they would be stacked very, very tightly because they are very thin and flat. And then this is columnar epithelia, and so columnar epithelium, you can see the cells individually. This is one cell, and that has this brush border, so this could be villi or microvilli, as we'll look at later, or it could be cilia. In this case, I think it's villi, so this is one cell deep, and then underneath this there are different type of cells. We're not going to talk about this other later, so we're just looking at the columnar epithelia. Okay, the next type of tissue is muscle. It's designed to change shape, to shorten or lengthen. So there are three types of muscle tissue. So there's skeletal. All the cells line up in the same direction, and the tissue looks striped, or as we refer to it, as striated. It attaches to bone. It's found in the arms and legs, and any muscle that you can move consciously. So any muscle that you can think about and then move is skeletal muscle. The second type of muscle is smooth muscle. So smooth muscle is made of tapered cells, and it's not striated. It doesn't have any patterning on it. It's found in surrounding blood vessels and surrounding organs like the esophagus and the stomach. So smooth muscle, you are not under conscious control. You can't think about your esophagus and make it contract and relax. And around your blood vessels, it relaxes or contracts due to environmental factors like temperature and due to hormones, but you can't think about your blood vessels and make them constrict or relax. So it contracts unconsciously. It's not under your control. The third type of muscle is cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle, it may have nuclei that appear between the cells. The cells have branches and they're unevenly striated. So they look somewhat similar to skeletal muscle, but they don't have striation or stripes that are very regular. They have uneven stripes. And it contracts as a unit, and it's found only in one place. It's only found in the heart. And the thing with cardiac muscle that's interesting is that it actually, if you have one single cardiac muscle cell, it will actually contract and relax all on its own. It will undergo the process of muscle contraction and relaxation without any signals. And if you get a group of cardiac muscle tissues together, a group of cells, they will also contract and relax without any signals. So really, the heart will beat regardless of whether or not it's getting signals from the brain. The brain actually signals to the pace of the heartbeat. The heart will continue to beat even if the brain is not actively signaling it. So here's what these look like. So here's your striated or striped muscle. So this is the striated or skeletal muscle. There's your smooth muscle, and this you can see two different ways. One is a longitudinal section and one is a cross section. So in the longitudinal section, you see long bands, and you can see the nuclei between the sections. And the third one is your cardiac muscle. So the cardiac muscle, you can see it has a somewhat striped appearance, and it has a branched appearance. And the purple things are the nuclei between the cells. So they're not, they don't seem to be in the cell, they seem to be in between cells. So those are the three types of muscle tissue. Then we have nervous tissue. So these are made of cells called neurons. They have finger-like projections to receive and transfer signals. They coordinate body actions. So some relay signals from the brain or spinal cord to muscle and glands. Some detect info from the environment and trigger the body's responses. So there's two distinct things that the nervous tissue is responsible for. So relaying signals from the brain out into the muscles and glands to make your muscles or glands do things, and detecting information from the environment and triggering a response. So getting information from the environment back to the brain, which then causes for the relay of signals from the brain back to the muscle and glands. So it's a continuous cycle, but there's two distinct roles. So here's an example of nervous tissue. So whenever you look for neurons, you're going to see a cell body at the center that is darkly stained, and then you're going to see a long sort of shaft coming out from it, and then from the end of that, sort of a web-like at the end of the long shaft. So that is what neurons look like. The last type of tissue that we're going to look at is connective tissue. So connective tissue is sort of a little bit of a mixed bag of tissues. It has a lot of different tissue types, but it strengthens, supports, protects, or connects tissues. So connective tissue has many roles in the body. The first type we're going to look at is bone. So bone connective tissue are special cells that are surrounded by calcium-hardened extracellular material, and blood vessels run through. So a lot of times people think that bone is empty or hard or dense and doesn't contain any cells, but bone actually has cells in it, living cells, and is surrounded by calcium extracellular material. But there are also blood vessels running through your bones to feed those cells that exist in bone. So the purpose of bone, obviously, it's needed for support. Without your bones, you would be a puddle on the floor. It's needed for movement, so to attach your muscles to, and it's needed for protection. You've got this nice skull that protects your brain, and you have a chest plate that protects your heart, your sternum. The next type of connective tissue we're going to look at is adipose. So adipose, or fat tissue, are large, tightly packed cells. They're found under skins and surrounding organs, and they are very useful for one, their energy storage. So if you go a long time without eating, if you fast for some reason, your body will actually start to use the fat tissue that you have stored, because the fat tissue is very well packaged energy. So it packs the energy in a very tight compartment, a lot of energy. But they're also useful for padding and insulation. So fat tissue is not just storage, and is not just something that you have if you, sometimes people say they are fat or they're not fat, but no matter if you are thick or thin, you have a layer of fat underneath your skin. That's an insulating layer, so that when you go outside into the environment, your body doesn't start to freeze right away. But also you have adipose tissue as padding surrounding your organs. So your heart actually has a layer of adipose tissue surrounding it to protect your heart. So it is also protective, and you have adipose tissue protecting all your internal organs as well, sort of giving a layer of cushioning. Okay, the third type of connective tissue we're going to look at is blood. So blood includes red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets in a fluid called plasma. So red blood cells, white blood cells are cellular. Platelets are not actual full cells, and then the fluid is the sort of the exterior fluid that doesn't have the cells in it, is the plasma. So the purpose of blood is to transport nutrients and oxygen. It also transports waste and carbon dioxide. And the other big thing that blood does is that it clots when your skin is cut. So when you have an injury, your blood naturally starts to flow out of that cut, but then it also sends signals to stop the blood flow, and that's your blood starts to clot. And it also has the important role in the immune system, so it attacks invaders such as bacteria and viruses. If you're more interested in this, you should take the grade 12 health science course. Okay, so here's a couple of pictures of the tissue types. So there is bone, so you can see the radiating rings of calcium. But in those rings, all those black spots are actual cells. So there are cells within that tissue. You can see adipose tissue or adipose cells. And you can see there's really not a lot in them. The big white parts there are all just stored fat, and there's nothing really getting in the way of that. So they're all just stored in giant vacuoles, and you can't really see much else in these cells because really there's nothing. Everything else is sort of smushed to the sides and smushed to the outside of the cell. And then here's blood, and so you can see red blood cells are in sort of beigey brown, and they have a lighter center area. White blood cells are sort of misnamed when we look at them under a microscope because white blood cells are stained quite well, so they stain purple. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 different white blood cells, and these are different types of white blood cells, and so these white blood cells function in the immune system. And then there are platelets. So the platelets are spread out here. You can't see a ton of them, and they stain dark. They are cell fragments, so they're not complete cells, and they also are involved. They're involved in blood clotting. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you that you look at the tissue samples and try to figure out what they are. So hopefully, as you look at the tissue samples on your own, you can see what each tissue sample is. And I'm just going to quickly, if you haven't gone through this already, go back and look at the PowerPoint separately. So this tissue sample is skin epithelia. This tissue sample is nervous tissue. This tissue sample is striated or skeletal muscle. This tissue sample is cardiac muscle. This tissue sample is bone tissue. This sample is smooth muscle. And this is blood. This is columnar epithelium. And this is cardiac muscle. This is fat tissue. And that's as far as we're going to go for that. So go back and look at those, see if you can identify them yourself, and that's the end of the video.